for Stellar Radio. I'm Michael Rochus, here for our day of academia with our feature interview, Dr. Howard Rundle.
Hi.
Doctor, first things first, where did you go to school?
I did my undergraduate work at the University of Toronto, and my graduate work there as well, actually. Truth be known, once I entered grade 1, I never left school. So when I graduated from university, then I worked in the University of Pittsburgh in the U.S., then came back to York University for a couple of years, and then I came to Fanshawe College. So I've really never been out of school.
All right. Now, what are some things that you picked up while you were attending as a student that maybe you could pass along to our student audience out there?
Okay, well, I think two things I would say. The most important thing is to really work hard at your program on the academic side. I mean, it's going to position you for the rest of your life. It'll give you that first job, but even, all the research shows nowadays nobody graduates and then does the same job all their life. I'm not. But the skills you learn and about how to learn, how to work, your attitude to work, and many of the generic skills are good in every kind of job. So really putting a big effort into your academic work is the first and most important thing. Secondly, I would say what I learned was that the extracurricular life in an institution like Fanshawe is important. It's fun as well, but you learn things. Things about life and how to interact with people and how to deal with people. So I really enjoyed, I got quite involved in student government and residence life. Quite enjoyed that and learned a lot about working with people in that environment.
Now, the role of the student has changed a lot from perhaps when you went to school. What are some of the biggest changes that you've noticed in students from, say, when you went to school to the present?
Okay, well, the biggest change, I would say, is the use of technology. In some ways, it makes life a lot easier. I can remember, of course, my day we didn't have, there were computers, but there were these great enormous things in basements of buildings. They weren't things that you had in your room. There weren't even, when I started, by the end it was different, but in those days there weren't even electronic calculators. And I was in a science program in chemistry, and we had to do chemistry labs where you had to be very, very accurate. And I can remember having to tromp in the winter across Queen's Park in Toronto in the snow to go to the chemistry lab to use this big mechanical calculator because it could calculate things out to 5 or 6 digits that now you can do practically on a thing the size of your watch. Data would all be recorded on computers now. And when we had to run a computer program, we had to, each line of the computer code, it's called, would have to be typed onto a card about this big. Then you had to put those cards all in order and take this deck and take it to this building that had the computer in it, and give it to them, and they would run that program. So there's a lot about the technology today that, boy, I wish I'd had when I was a student. It would have made life a lot easier. That's one of the biggest things. In terms of the work and what people want out of life, I think a lot of that hasn't really changed a whole lot.
You are tuned to Stellar Radio right now with our feature interview for our Academia Day, Dr. Howard Rundle. Doctor, Fanshawe has, well, I don't know whether it's good or bad, but they definitely have a reputation as being a very fun school. The name Fanshawe has been tossed around quite a bit. How are you trying to shift perceptions?
Well, you make a very good point. There's good and bad about that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having fun in a post-secondary institution. And the student life component should be about fun that is learning as well. And most of our activities are, whether you're in student government, whether you get involved in sport, whether you get involved in student newspaper, whether you get involved with the many clubs that our student union runs. All of those are fun, but all of those have a learning component. The bad side is some of the trouble we've had that has always been off campus in some of the housing districts nearby, where the college has no direct influence on what happens there, and where people get carried away, where they aren't respectful of neighbors or even themselves, drink to excess in public places, and then sometimes assemble, and it goes from bad to worse, and you can get into violence and other things. So that's been bad, but I'd have to say that that's been improving. And largely because the college, and particularly our student union, realized several years ago that that wasn't good for their own reputation and the reputation of the Fanshawe diploma. It's great that the diploma stands for somebody who's well-trained in a career, but if it also carries this little stain of bad behavior, employers obviously want people who are well-trained. But remember what I said about attitude. They want people with good attitude, and not the kind of person who is going to be so disrespectful of others that they behave in violent and inappropriate ways. So they have worked with us, and we have worked with the London Police and with the City of London to really discourage that kind of behavior. And I think it's working. 2 years ago was the first year where in September there weren't any really serious incidents. And we thought we'd got through that whole year and everything would be fine, and it turned out Halloween. The weather was warm, and it tends to happen when the weather's warm, and then people go outdoors, and then they assemble in larger groups, and that's where problems can occur. And we had an incident at Halloween that was not good at all. Last year, we didn't have any serious incident, and so far this year, I haven't heard of any serious incident. So I think we're on the right track, and I want Fanshawe to mean good learning fun.
Okay.
Not the kind that has occurred off campus in the past.
On a yearly basis, the publication Maclean's releases a top universities in Canada list. Unfortunately, I don't believe there is such a community college list. How do you think that Fanshawe, ranks in comparison to maybe some, countrywide
colleges?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me say a couple. First, to answer that, of course, it's number one. But there is no Maclean's list, and the reason for that is that it would be extremely difficult to do because the colleges in the different provinces, and they're controlled by the provinces, not the country. The college system is somewhat different from province to province, and so it gets very hard to compare the two. For example, in many provinces, you can go and take the first 2 years of a university arts or science degree in the college. You can't do that in Ontario. So they have different student bodies and different kinds of programming. It's just so difficult to compare. Maclean's was interested in that. In fact, I remember talking to the editor some years back after when the university thing became so popular. They wondered if they could do the same thing in colleges, and they looked at it and really came to the conclusion that wasn't possible. So they've published excellent articles on the college system and describing the colleges, but they haven't really been able to do a ranking.
Right. Finally, to wrap up, is there any big changes coming to learning in the college in the future, or?
Well, there are always changes. I'm not sure about so much to learning. I would say one of the bigger changes that's coming to Fanshawe in the near future is that we're going to be really developing in downtown London. And I think that could be quite exciting for some of the programs that are going to be there, because we're going to want programs there that fit that environment. Arts and entertainment types of programs. In fact, think about your program. If we could have a studio right in the heart of the city.
Mhm.
That could be quite interesting, as opposed to just out here on the edge. I mean, that's fine, people can come out here for interviews, but if you were, say, right near where the market is, or the JLC, where the action is happening, and if London really develops, and our city is developing a major plan to develop downtown London, then Fanshawe can be a big part of that. And I think that could really be exciting.
Right. Thank you for taking the time today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for